If you're watching this, you're probably a man who falls into one of two camps. On one end of the extreme, you might be a man who has insecurities and feelings of inferiority and low self-worth that are eating away at the fabric of your relationship. Maybe you get jealous or insecure about certain things, or maybe you try to control certain elements of how she acts to overcome those feelings of jealousy. Overall, you just have this sense of insecurity, a fear of abandonment, a fear that she's going to find better, that she's going to leave you, that is tearing apart of the fabric of your relationship. Now, on the other side of the spectrum, you might be a man who's actually quite comfortable in who he is and actually has quite a high level sense of independence and individuality. And as a result of that, you might find that your partner's a bit too clingy for you, a bit too emotional. She wants a bit too much of your time and attention. And that causes you to want to, take a step back and kind of go into your own shell and just avoid the problem and avoid really handling that entire emotional situation. Regardless of what end of the spectrum that you're at, we're going to cover the root cause of those problems in this video, because I can guarantee you those problems are causing you a lot of conflict in the relationship that you don't want to have to deal with because it's distracting you from every other area of your life. And you just want to get your needs met, whether they are closeness and affection and security in the relationship, or on the other end, just a little bit of individuality, independence, and maybe a less overwhelming sensation of pressure within that relationship. So the first thing that we understand, because we're going to cover three things in this video, the three things that I believe that every man needs to understand to be a better boyfriend. And I've learned this through my own shortcomings and failing a 4-year relationship, which ultimately ended as a result of not knowing this stuff. I want to walk you through everything that I've learned. These three things in particular are going to change the game for you, just like they did for me in my current relationship. So essentially, the first thing I want to talk about is attachment theory. So imagine that there are 4 different attachment styles, and attachment styles are essentially just patterns of behavior that govern and define how you interact and see intimacy within your relationship. And this typically stems from the relationship that you had with your parents. So if you are the guy who's a bit more nervous and anxious and jealous and a bit more emotional about whether or not their partner's going to leave them, you probably had quite coddling parents who were always attending to your every need, and maybe didn't give you such a high level sense of independence, and you relied heavily on them to meet your emotional needs. But of course, that relationship that you've had and that sense that your needs would always be met has of course bled into your adult relationships. And the same goes on the other end of the spectrum. Maybe if you're the type of guy who's quite avoidant and you're quite emotionally distant from your partner at times, find it hard to be empathetic and quite independent, then maybe you had parents who gave you total freedom and they didn't even care what you did, and they just let you go and be how you wanted, and they didn't provide you the nurturing that you needed as a kid. So there are 4 real quadrants here, 4 real types of these attachment styles. The first being the anxious attachment style. And this is that first extreme, the type of guy who is quite anxious about his relationship. He fears being abandoned. He is quite desperate or needy for validation and emotional attention from your partner. You're obviously, like I said, fearing abandonment. You have this sense of jealousy and inferiority to other people that makes you feel like she's going to jump ship. Maybe you have just overall insecurities that plague you at night and make you wonder, is she being loyal? And you ultimately try to control her behavior as a result of that. Now, the second is the avoidant. So the avoidant is the other end of the spectrum. And they are the types of guys who are quite independent. They had parents who allowed them their independence. And so as a result of their parents who probably weren't as emotionally close as they would have liked them to be as kids, now when they have emotional closeness as adults in their partners, it actually feels a bit scary to them. It feels a bit threatening to their individuality and independence. So they start to push their partners away to maintain that emotional distance because that's what they're familiar with. And then in the upper right quadrant, we have the anxious avoidant, which is a combination of the two. And this is a blend of a push-pull dynamic, right? Where you're in one moment feeling very insecure about the relationship and you want to do what you can to try and get your partner's attention. And then the next moment, you're feeling like you want to push yourself away and get away. And there's just this yin yang, this maybe a better way to describe it is like a swinging of a pendulum between really wanting her attention and feeling insecure about the relationship to wanting your own independence and your own space. Now, these 4 quadrants are based on these 2 different vectors, which would be on the vertical, it would be, that would be the most anxious. So it would be the most anxious, and this would be most avoidant. fuck that one up, but we'll avoid that or ignore that. So obviously, what we want to aim for is a sense that you are secure in your relationship, where you're not feeling like you need to be avoidant emotionally, where you're not feeling like you have this anxious attachment to your partner, but where you just feel like you have a good grounded sense of self-worth and a sense of interdependence, where you aren't fully, independent, separate from your partner, but you also aren't fully dependent on them. And that would be this third quadrant, which would be secure. So one of the things that I learned in my own past relationship is that I gravitated around this area, mostly avoidant, sometimes anxious avoidant. And what that creates is this sense of disconnect between you and your partner. Because if you're always trying to, if there's an argument, avoid and run away from and not handle and not deal with problems, then those problems are going to build and resentment's going to build. Obviously, if you get to the anxious avoidant side of the spectrum, which is obviously the extreme end, then you're going to have this push-pull dynamic where 1 second you want to be close because you're anxious and you're worried about and insecure about the relationship, and the next moment you're wanting to again create that distance. So what I really had to overcome here was this sense of, or this need for absolute independence and almost this fear of intimacy. And a lot of this comes from actually developing the tools of cognitive empathy and empathy in general, which is being able to not only just picture and understand what your partner's experiencing, but being able to actually envision yourself in their shoes experiencing that so that you can understand that at the deepest level. So the avoidants typically, like I said, need to really work on developing empathy in order to connect deeply with their partner and give them, because typically avoidance mix with anxious types, and give your partner the security that they need to make sure that they're not getting caught in an anxious cycle either. Now, if you're in an anxious attachment style type, then you need to do the opposite, which is actually you need to start to build a greater sense of independent self-worth outside of the relationship. You need to start to value yourself more and gain your own self-respect by going and doing hard things and getting in shape and working hard on your career and achieving things that intrinsically allow you to build an internal sense of self-respect and confidence in yourself that you can't really get any other way except for doing hard things. And through doing that and through developing this newfound sense of independence, you can start to value yourself to the point where you aren't afraid of your partner leaving you and you aren't afraid of things going wrong and then your life getting turned upside down, because you have this secure base of, I'm okay, I'm happy with who I am, and if this relationship ends, I'm okay because I know I'm going to find someone else. Now, the opposite extreme with the avoidance is that they actually always have that sense of, it's okay no matter what, if this whole relationship falls apart, like I'll be fine. And while there is a degree of that that's healthy, there is an extreme of that that's unhealthy, which is that you see your relationship as, this optional thing, right? It's important to you, but it's not like the most important thing, because if it falls apart, like it's not the end of the world. So you actually have to kind of do the opposite thing, which is you have to start to increase the importance of the relationship and increase the importance of your partner in your mind and develop a better sense and a better relationship with intimacy as a whole. So this is the first thing that I'd be looking at. Now, the second thing, and this is more of a binary split. So the second thing I would recommend doing is integrating your, people might call this sexual energy or sexual polarity, but integrating the two halves of yourself that every single person has. So on one side, we have the feminine, and on the other side is the blue, we have the masculine. And between these 2 points is this massive spectrum. Now, typically, because a lot of humans are quite binary and black or white, they're going to fall into one of these camps more than the other. And again, you can sit anywhere along this spectrum. Some men are quite hypermasculine and they've completely disconnected from their feminine, which Carl Jung called the anima. And they're quite, again, this aligns quite tightly with the avoidant types, where they lack empathy, they're very pursuit-driven, they're very driven as a whole, but ultimately they're going to pursue growth, even if it's at the expense of their relationship, and pursue progress and conquering at the expense of their relationship. So again, these guys are going to really struggle to connect emotionally and have empathy and have those conversations with their partner because they don't have that ability. And not only that, they're actually going to find it hard to navigate conflict because they're going to find it hard to compromise, and they're going to find it hard to really see everything from their partner's perspective. Again, that's one extreme. On the opposite extreme, we have the more anxious types, which would be the more feminine types, which is high empathy, high emotional intelligence, and being highly in touch with their intuition and their gut, but being completely disconnected from like their leadership abilities and their sense of dominance and their drive to pursue things and pursue progress. And they'll probably be the much more people-pleasing types. So rather than being the types who are quite arrogant and dismissive, they'll be the types to always apologize and say sorry, even when they did nothing wrong. They'll be the types to always people-please and appease to their partner and do everything that they want, even if they don't get their own needs met. And so again, this other extreme is no better than the opposing extreme. So what do I mean when I say integrate these two sides? Essentially, we have to find a healthy middle ground between these 2 points. And where on the spectrum it's going to be is really obviously independent of your situation. You're going to have to determine that for yourself. But typically it's going to be somewhere around this middle point. What I do understand though is that, and what I've learned myself, because there was a period where I was completely disconnected from my feminine, and there's also been other periods where I was completely disconnected from my masculine. And so really depending on the situation you're in, you're going to have to pull in the opposite direction. If you pull more towards the masculine side and you have to re-pull yourself back towards the feminine side, you're going to have to start to really work on developing empathy. And again, this is not an easy thing. I say this and throw it out like it's simple to do, but developing empathy is incredibly difficult, especially for the guys who have been on this extreme for their entire lives. And there are 2 types of empathy. There's affective empathy, which is emotional empathy, and there's cognitive empathy. So a lot of these types of guys are going to really struggle with affective empathy and emotional empathy, which is to physically feel the emotions of the person that you're talking to. In the case of it being your partner, if they're feeling an emotion, you're not going to be able to very easily like physically feel what they're feeling. But that's only one form of empathy. What I would recommend these guys build is cognitive empathy, which is the ability to understand the beliefs and the thoughts of the person that's experiencing this emotion, in this case your partner, and then as a result of that, derive the emotion that they must be experiencing. And then almost within your mind, picture yourself in their position with their thoughts, their belief system, and understand that, okay, that emotion for one is a rational response if I was to think like them. And then what would I need as a result of that? Which would be to be heard, to feel seen, and to feel understood in the problem, and just to be supported. Because a lot of these types of guys, and we'll get into this in a moment a lot deeper, these types of guys are going to be very solution oriented, meaning that they're not going to be thinking, how can I emotionally support this person? They're going to think, what's the solution to this problem? So if your partner comes to you with a problem and she's emotional, you're going to think, it's okay, I've got the solution. It's this, this, and this. Just do that, problem solved. And she's going to think, what the fuck, man? You're not hearing me at all. You completely just blew off what I just said. I'm saying, I feel like this. And you're saying, yes, but you feel like this because of this. And here's the solution. That's not what to do. You have to actually just simply be there, listen. Ask questions, listen more, ask more questions, listen more, give them the support they need and ask them, what do they need from you to feel most supported right now? That's how these types of guys can start to pull themselves back to this side of the equation, alongside building emotional intelligence and reconnecting with their own body and their own internal feelings. Again, it sounds a bit woo-woo and a bit soft, but a lot of these guys have completely disconnected themselves from the physical sensation of emotion, and they'll just recognize the cognitive side of it, which is like, oh, I'm pissed. And while that might be the case, it's like, well, if we look layers deeper, are you pissed because there's a sense of anxiety or stress you've got going on? Are you pissed because you're unhappy about something? Are you pissed because you've got resentment towards someone? Are you pissed because you have an insecurity that's being triggered? A lot of these guys will just rationalize based on the thoughts that they're experiencing, what it is that they're experiencing, but they've completely disconnected from their own sense of experience of that thing. And so they can't even rationalize or understand those different levels of emotions. So again, these guys have to pull back more by getting more in touch with the emotional elements of their life, have a bit more fun, kind of loosen up a bit. These guys tend to be very like tight and very needing of control. So you very much have to like let go of that control and start to let go. I don't want to say let go to the universe because that sounds super woo-woo and super like, manifesty and all that whack bullshit. But you do have to let go of like the tightness and need for control within yourself. That's going to allow you to pull back over here. On the other side of the spectrum, if you have a more feminine makeup and more feminine psychology, you're going to have to pull yourself back into the position of self-leadership, which is being able to be decisive, both for yourself and for your partner. So if she wants you to decide where to eat, you don't want to go, oh, wherever you want to eat, whatever you want to do. You have to make the decision. She asks you what of 2 options you'd prefer out of what she's wearing. Just pick one. Just make a decision and be decisive. Now, the same goes with leading your own life, knowing what you want to do with your career and pursuing that daily, knowing the kind of body you want to build and the kind of person you want to build and become, and pursuing those goals daily, and really committing yourself to go all in on developing into the man that you want to become with a very clear plan of attack and a very clear set of goals. Again, these guys moving from here to here, it's going to require a massive character shift. The same goes with the opposite direction, but a lot of it comes down to just becoming the type of man who is more, I guess, desiring the pursuit of goals, because that's a heavy part of this, more able to lead himself and others, which is a heavy part of this, and has more control over himself, right? To not be so emotionally swung by everything, but to pull back into logic and reason so that you can begin to understand things at a more rational level. Again, what we're trying to aim for is this middle point right here, which is the healthy middle point of the integrated man. Now, the third thing I want to talk about is understanding how to manage difficult conversations and conflict, because this, at least for me, was one of the hardest things that I had to learn. Because again, if you're over on this side and you're in the avoidance side, you're going to find it very difficult to empathize and to manage conflict in a way that isn't very self-focused. If you are on this other end of the spectrum and you're more anxious, while you may feel that in the moment, you're always going to try and come back to fix the problem. Because in moments of conflict, there's going to be this sense of anxiety of, they're going to leave me, I'm not good enough, I've pissed them off, I have to do something to fix this. You go buy them flowers to try and make up for it. You go do all these nice things and clean the house and make dinner to try and make up for it. But those aren't handling conflict. Conflict and conflict management and having difficult conversations is very much a game of coming to the same plane of thinking. So for example, let's say that this is you and this is your partner. Give them both nice little smiley faces. Even though in this case, let's make these unhappy faces, because actually this is probably going to be some conflict. If your partner comes to you and she says, I have this problem. Let's do this in red. I have this problem. Let's just say that this square represents a problem. How you manage that problem is it going to come down to how well you can actually hear her and understand her and actually rationalize on the same level. Because if she says this and then you go, yeah, well, I'm experiencing this, and you give a circle back or whatever, the shape represents some form of a response that isn't what she said. You're right here on two completely different playing fields. You're speaking on two different levels. You're not seeing eye to eye, and thus, as a result of that, you're both going to feel a sense of resentment and conflict. What you're trying to do is be able to come to the same mutual understanding and conclusion. So if she vocalizes a problem, you might start by saying, I hear you, like I understand, this is what you're saying. If this is what you're saying, please tell me more about that. And you're trying to understand it. And then once you get to this level where you're both seeing things from eye to eye, and she feels understood and you feel like you've understood her, then you can start to bring your side of the equation into it and say, okay, I want to hear you out. They explain everything. You ask probing questions. You analyze more deeply. You actively listen. You get on the same playing field until she can say, I feel like you have listened and you understand where I'm coming from. From that position, you can start to say, okay, well now, if you don't mind, let me start to share my perspective on this. And I'm not saying offer a solution. I'm saying that if there is conflict and you're seeing things from a different perspective, hear hers out first. And then you can jump into, okay, well now let me share my side of the spectrum. And then you share your side. And if she is emotionally developed enough, and if you've done a good enough job of this, she'll be much more resonant to what you have to say. If she is obviously emotionally developed enough and you say this, then she can start to listen back. And then she can start to get on the same level playing field and say, okay, you're saying this and I'm saying this. And you've both been heard out. You aren't jumping and attacking each other and blaming and shaming and criticizing and saying, how dare you think this because I think this. But none of that. Like, you have to completely fuck that off from your line of thinking, because again, you're trying to get on the same playing field. So you start by hearing them out, then you can be heard out yourself. And then ultimately what you want to come to is this mutual point in the middle, where both of these lines of thinking can be mutually understood on a level where you can create a solution that meets both of those needs, where you're integrating these two sides. Well, there may need to be some compromise on this, potentially, but the truth is that until you can both get on a level playing field, you can't even get to the point where you can come to a mutual agreement on what the problem is and what the solution is. So you start by getting on the same playing field, You start by hearing each other out. You start by getting to the point where, yes, she feels like you've understood her, and yes, you feel like she's understood you. And then finally, you can be like, okay, well, now that we understand where we're both coming from, let's find a mutual solution. And again, it's not easy. These are very emotional moments, and they're going to trigger you, and they're going to push you guys away in some degree, but you have to work through the process in this exact order, because there's no other way to come to a solution. So those three things, honestly, for me, learning these was the difference between my last relationship being just a complete wreck by the end of it, where we were just both not seeing things eye to eye. I wasn't hearing her, she wasn't hearing me, and then we split our separate ways just because the relationship had become so unstable that there was really no other solution. But now learning these three things and applying them in my new relationship, my current relationship, it has been the entire world of difference. Like two completely different realities that you wouldn't even believe that one person could experience both. And this is why I think that the three most important things that you can build as a man to have thriving relationships are these three things. Firstly, understanding your attachment style, understanding your partner's attachment style, and then being able to communicate those to each other. So for example, if I still fall maybe once every couple of months into an avoidant state, I'll always tell my partner straight away, hey, I'm feeling a bit avoidant today, probably going to take a bit of time to myself, and I don't want you to feel like I don't love you or that I'm pushing you away. I just personally want to take a bit of time. And because she understands my attachment style, because we've had this conversation multiple times, she'll go, that's all good. I'm here for you. I love you. I'll give you that space, and just reach out when you want to. On the other end of the spectrum, if you are an anxious type, you of course still need to use the same principles, which are being transparent, being vulnerable, and saying, hey, I'm feeling anxious right now, and here's why. And these are the behaviors that have caused me to feel that way. And being able to communicate, like, this is my world. This is what I experience. I have this attachment type, and I want to try and find a way to minimize the amount of triggeredness that I'm feeling as a result of that. Again, with this, the main thing is communication and getting on the same page. With this second level, which is integrating those sexual energies or that sexual polarity, this is more of an independent, focused thing. This is something that you have to do internally yourself. And of course, there are internal levels of growth that you can do here as well. Again, improving empathy and emotional intelligence, and up here, improving your own sense of self-leadership and your own sense of masculine drive. But here, a lot of it is very much you and you only, which means that if you're on one end of the spectrum, you have to start to develop the opposing traits to start to reintegrate both sides of yourself. If you're on the feminine side, you have to again develop that self-leadership, that masculine drive, the pursuit to pursue goals, and actually doing that, building your own self-respect as a result of pursuing those goals, doing so more so through the lens of the actual pursuit of those goals being the result and the character growth that you get, versus thinking, once I pursue and achieve this goal, then I'll become this. No, it's simply the pursuit of this and the pursuit of goals and your ambitious desires and the hard things that you do each day that's going to allow you to build the character traits that move you over here. Again, on the other side, you have to start to reconnect with your internal sense of femininity, your softness, your emotional side, your empathy, your just overall emotional intelligence, and yeah, your ability to be more compromising, less, assertiveness is good, but you have to find a healthy middle ground where you're not arrogant. A lot of these guys can become quite arrogant because, again, they don't have the empathy to understand other people's perspectives. They just see my perspective, and my perspective is right because I've thought it through, and fuck your perspective. So again, you have to reconnect with that sense of empathy and emotional intelligence to find that middle ground in the middle. Now at the bottom, when it comes to conflict resolution and difficult conversations, again, the goal is to get on the same level playing field by actually having a mutual sense of empathy and respect for each other, where I'm going to hear you, I would like you to hear me, and we'll take turns hearing each other out, fully understanding each other's problems, and then we'll come to a mutual agreement on a solution. So again, she's going to say something, you are not mentioning what you think or what you want, you're saying, you're experiencing this, tell me more about that. What has caused that? What are you thinking about? What is that experience like for you? Until she fully understands, yes, he understands where I'm coming from. Then you can say, now that I've heard you out, would you mind me sharing my side of the point? She says yes, you share your side. Hopefully, if she's learned from your, obviously, handling of that, then she can start to ask probing questions and listen to you and say, okay, you said that, I hear you, what is that like for you? Obviously easier said than done because you can't control your partner. But if this entire dynamic can come to fruition, then you can both say, okay, now that you hear me and I hear you, what is the mutual agreement that we can come to with some degree of compromise on either side? and then you can come to that mutual agreement and ultimately allow yourself to move forward from that conflict without holding on to any resentment. Because that lingering resentment is going to be the thing that tears apart at the fabric of your relationships. And so as a result of that, you need to regain control of yourself enough so that you don't become super emotional and super defeatist or super defeating of her. Like you want to make sure that you're finding a healthy middle ground where you're balancing assertiveness with empathy. Like I said, those are the 3 things to become a better partner, boyfriend, husband, whatever it may be for you. If you enjoyed, subscribe. I'll leave a link down below as well to join the waitlist for Better Men Academy, which is coming out very, very soon. And with that, I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.